Hey beautiful people, today we're gonna take a look at the Magnus Trap, which happens in Sicilian Defense. And this trap is both solid and yet super effective. It's been played even in the World Championship match, and without further ado, let's take a look. As I said, it happens against the Sicilian Defense, against the most classical variation of the Sicilian Defense. And here you play bishop c4, the move which was played a lot by Bobby Fischer, because from here the bishop looks at the black's king and therefore it sets the stage for the future potential attack and usually leads to sharp dynamic positions later on. And in this position, black often goes pawn to g6. It's one of the normal ways for black to finish their development, and they think that both players are just developing their pieces, and yet this is a moment where you have an interesting continuation here. You can first of all trade the knights, and then you sacrifice the pawn here on e5. And at first black may think that your intent is to trade off the queens, and that's the reason for you to give up the pawn, so that they thought that you're gonna trade the queens here on d8, and that's the reason why you gave up the pawn. But in fact, if you follow me for a little while, then you know what you gotta be doing here, right? First of all, you gotta do this, and then you play bishop takes f7 instead. The thing is, after black captures the bishop, which is something they forced to do, you can grab the queen on d8 for nothing. You're not going to trade queens, you're going to win the queen, and it's time to resign. A lot of people fell into the trap, and therefore it is really workable. At this point you may wonder, hey Igor, but you said that grandmasters play this line, how come that black is just losing so badly? Well, let me clarify a couple of things here. First of all, the trap is named after Magnus Smith, the 3-time Canadian champion, not Magnus Carlsen. Anyway, Magnus Smith was a strong player, and the trap is definitely good. But the thing is, very often black players think that there is no big danger for them, as they only need to move their knight away from f6, and they're doing perfectly fine. They only need to be aware of this trap d takes e5 and not to fall into it. While it's partially correct, if black moves their knight away, they are doing okay, but I'm gonna show you a couple really powerful continuations so that you can get a very favorable position and really strong attack even if black does something else. Let's start with the move knight h5, which is not the best reaction, but you still need to do how to react here as white. The proper move for white here is queen goes to f3 with a double attack to the black's f7 pawn as well as the c6 pawn, and actually black is already in trouble. If they try to close the position by playing pawn to d5, of course we're not going to move away because you can break through the black's defense, and after this temporary sacrifice, you're renewing the threats to the f7 square, trying to checkmate the black's king as well as the rook, and you're going to grab probably the rook on the next move and get a winning position. Therefore, black can't save their position that easily. Let's take a move back from here. Since d5 does not work for black here, they gotta look for some other way to cover their f7 square, and the only normal move here is pawn to e6. In this case, actually, there are multiple ways for white to finish their attack. The way suggested by Fischer was pawn to g4, kicking the knight away, and after that knight goes to e4, which sets another interesting trap, and actually even two traps, I'd say. The most obvious intent here is for the knight to go to f6 and to attack the black's king. Therefore, it's not that easy for black to do something about that. Also, we're putting pressure towards that d6 square. If black goes pawn to d5, trying to close the position, it does not work once again. In this case, it fails due to knight f6, king to e7, and here the left hook wins, queen a3, and black is gonna be checkmated after a few moves. It's also a really beautiful checkmating position here. I just took a move back here, so we know that d5 does not save black. They're going to be checkmating in this case, but there is another way for black to play, which is a lot more tempting. Black may go queen a5 with a counterattack, which is a check to the white's king, and if you cover it, black is going to play queen takes e5, and at the moment, it looks like black is doing just great. They won the central pawn. White cannot go knight f6 because the knight is pinned along the e file, so it may seem like something is wrong with the white's plan. But it's not quite the case, as you continue here bishop c3, and all of a sudden the black's queen is trapped in the middle of the board. There are so many squares where it can possibly go to, but all of them are under the fire of the white's pieces. Another interesting and unique situation, and white obviously wins. Please give it a like if you enjoyed, as well as this entire variation, and let me show you a couple more lines that you gotta know in this opening variation. Another move you gotta be aware of is black's idea to counterattack with the move pawn to d5. And in this case, after you exchange pieces here, it's important for white not to trade the queens on d8, even though it is okay and white is still better in an endgame. But you don't really have the reason to go into an endgame because you have a really strong attack against the black's king in the middle game, and you don't want to make the black's life so easy. In this case, the problem for black, the main problem, is that their king is kind of stuck into the center, and their pieces are not developed, while white is ready to start punching. For example, if black takes here on f6, you can grab the pawn on c6, but you can just castle, which is even more powerful because, again, you're going after the black's king, right? You're going to attack it and hopefully checkmate it. If they try to escape and castle, you say not so fast and play bishop h6. Now, because this square is under the control, they can't castle anymore, and you can just bring more pieces into the attack very easily. Let's say they go something bishop d7 to protect the pawn, you go rook e1, and black is absolutely defenseless, they are paralyzed. Right now, by the way, you're threatening queen takes f6. Because of the pin, black can't capture the pawn, and so queen takes f6 is a major threat here. Maybe bishop g7 and taking this pawn with a bishop as well. All in all, you're killing here. So far we analyzed rather bad responses of black. Now let's take a look at the best responses of black so that you are prepared and you know what to do. Fischer, who also suggested a couple lines for us in the line knight to h5, he recommended for black to go knight g4. And like I said, a lot of players believe that if they just go knight g4 here, they are doing perfectly fine, and that is why they go for this position. They think there is no danger. But I've got you covered, and we will prepare a couple surprises for black here. But before we dive into the lines of this variation, let me ask you this question. If you're playing this position and it's your move, what is your first impulse here? How would you play here as white? Please think about it. And also write it down in the comments below, I'm curious to know. Because the thing is, in positions like that, very often players automatically capture on d6, because they see that the pawn is under the attack, and they gotta do something, and the easiest solution is just to trade it off, alright? So they capture the pawn here. And that is one of the key differences between strong players and like beginner level players. In fact, I would recommend that you take the opposite approach here. Whenever you exchange something, you make your opponent's life easier. Here, for example, after an exchange, they have an additional square to develop their bishop. The pawn on e5 is no longer there, and therefore cannot cause any attack, any danger for black, right? And black is just fine, right? They're gonna finish their development, and they're indeed doing really well. They can always play d5 to kick your bishop away. So it's a okay position, it's about equal position, but I mean, that's not how you should play. What I would recommend in positions like that is that you think how to keep up the pressure, or even better, how to increase the pressure instead of relieving the pressure and making your opponent's life easier. And therefore, in this case, what I would recommend you to think about is how can I attack? How can I create troubles for my opponent? That's how strong players handle positions like that. And if you ask yourself that question, not how to exchange, but how can I attack? How can I make it more complicated for my opponent? Then there are two other moves that you will find here. One of them is the move pawn to e6. It's been played in the World Championship match way back between Schlechter and Lasker. And at first it looks like white is just winning here, because with this pawn to e6, you're obviously attacking the pawn, but even more importantly, that interferes the bishop protecting the knight, and therefore you're also going to grab the knight. So at first it looks like white is just winning here, but in fact, Lasker played the correct move pawn to f5, which solves both of the problems for black, and they're doing perfectly fine here. That is why that's not the line that I would recommend for you to go for when you're white. The move that I recommend you to play here is the move bishop to f4. going along the lines of keeping up the pressure and increasing the pressure. Just like we discussed earlier, that's how strong players crush their opponents. And since we're talking about this, let me also say that if you're interested in these subjects and want to go a little deeper, we will soon open up enrollment for the course The Secrets of Strong Players, where I go in depth and analyze all the key differences specifically between stronger players and players who are trying to improve. And if you've been wondering what's holding you back, why cannot you progress in chess despite of knowing a lot about it, that's the program that you may be interested. Therefore, if you're interested, click the link below the video and join the waitlist so that once the program is available, we will let you know. And now let's talk about this particular position, okay? First of all, what if black takes on e5? Well, the variation is just the same, right? We're gonna take on f7, and after that, grab the queen. This is similar to the very original idea of this whole trap. Therefore, taking on e5 is not an option for black. Let's take a move back. However, if your opponent is tricky, he may think, okay, if I can't take on e5 right away because of this queen opposition, let me play queen b6 first, remove my queen, and along the way attacking this pawn on f2, and after white castles or protects the pawn somehow, I will then happily grab the pawn on e5. Some players, indeed, find this tricky counterattack of black, and you gotta know what to do. Here you play queen to f3 to protect the pawn, and after they happily grab on e5 thinking that they got you, then you once again may say this. And here comes bishop takes f7 anyways. Here the trick is slightly different. After black captures the bishop, you've got the discovered attack bishop e3, which is a check to the black's king and attack of the black's queen, therefore you'll grab the queen on the next move and win the game. Now we have analyzed most of the variations, there are just a few more to cover, and here after knight g4 and bishop f4, the move I recommend you to play, what if black goes pawn to d5? It's interesting that it's always tempting for black to play this move, trying to attack the bishop and to lock the position, but somehow it never works. And in this position you also can break through the black's defense, and it leads to a very interesting continuation, because here after an exchange you take by the queen, and even in an endgame you're gonna crush black. Black is forced to take the queen because here you're attacking just way too many pieces of black, therefore they will certainly trade queens. And now the point is, even in an endgame, because of these two bishops chasing the black's rook, you're gonna win it. For example, in the line rook b8, bishop can go give check first, and after that you go this pawn to e6 move. And it's quite interesting really, because first of all you're threatening to castle and at the same time to almost checkmate black's king. If you think about this, if white goes rook d1, the king is virtually checkmated. And therefore black's gotta do something about this, but in addition to that, you're threatening the rook and therefore you're gonna capture it. Now you won the rook, and you're gonna steal castle, attack the king, and you can collect this pawn on a7, and you're winning just all around. There's the final move that we haven't analyzed yet. It's the move knight to d7. Also a solid move of black, which was played by grandmasters, and definitely gotta know how to deal with it. First of all, even though it's tempting to push the pawn forward, e6, but it's just an exchange. In fact, it does not give white much, and it's much more powerful in this case to trade the pawns on d6, because after that you can castle, and just look at this. The black's king is so much exposed that you're gonna attack it directly and very soon, and black is quite defenseless against it. They have no time to play bishop g7 and castle, because you're gonna play rook e1. And if they play bishop e7, saying, okay, even though I played this move pawn to g6 and I've got weaknesses right here, but at least I want to castle there, you say bishop h6, and boom, that is not an option for black anymore. Therefore, black's king is stuck there forever on e8, and you're going to bring up more pieces and attack it. If they go knight e5, which is something that they do, looks good for black to develop a piece, attack your bishop along the way, while you can protect this bishop and just move it back to b3, saving all the advantages of your position, that is okay, but there is an even stronger move here, bishop g7, counter blow. Instead of moving the bishop away, you're counter-attacking the black's rook, and if they move it away, you then exchange this knight on e5, and after that go queen to f3. As you might notice here, queen f3 is a key attacking move in lots of these variations, and in this case, just as well, it attacks the f7 pawn, the c6 pawn, the black's king is still stuck there in the center, and you're gonna checkmate it, or at least get some very decisive advantage very soon. And to wrap this up, here comes an interesting task for you. In this case, we have analyzed the black's move rook g8, and after that, white traded off the knight, played queen to f3 and won the game. But there is a tricky response of black. What if they say, okay, I'm giving up the exchange, because after that, I want to play f6 and trap the bishop there on h8. So they're going to play king to f7 and just capture the bishop with a queen, thus gaining the material advantage. And you gotta know what to do. At first, white may play rook e1, makes sense, you're also threatening bishop f6 along the way. Black goes king to f7, and it's the key moment for this variation, because if black can happily grab the bishop, they are going to win the game. But it is your move, and you've got a chance to find the right way for white here, which will secure your victory. So please think about it and write it down in the comments below. Obviously, white should be winning here normally, but it's not that easy to find it out. So let's see if you can. Also, if you enjoyed this lesson, you may also enjoy watching another video, 5 best chess opening traps in the Sicilian Defense, where I cover different variations of the Sicilian Defense, not just one. I'll link it on the screen. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so that you can support the channel and will provide more valuable lessons for you. Enjoy your chess games, and I'll talk to you soon.